let me ask the parties this question before I hear from Mr. Iman. Are the parties available on the, I'm not going to hear it on the 5th. Are the parties available on the 19th?
The 19th of April, Your Honor?
Yes.
Yeah, so, Your Honor, I gave you the May 17th. So the trip that is on the 12th is a personal trip.
Right.
I gave you the 17th because that's the next Friday that I am available.
Oh.
I have work trips 4 weeks in a row.
Okay, thanks.
4 Fridays in a row. So I won't be gone for 4 weeks, but I will be gone on 4 Fridays.
I understand. Okay, thanks. Mr. Iman?
As you said, I had a lot to say, and I have even more to say, so indulge me.
I can't guarantee that.
Fair enough,
Okay.
fair enough. I guess the first thing I would start with is a lifetime ban. A ban for life. I am 53 years old. I am, it's just interesting, I thought about this last night, is that I'm adopted. And when I was in my mid-20s, I tracked down my birth parents because the parents that raised me were very type B personality, kind of laid back, and my birth parents turned out to be very type A. And they both graduated from college with political science degrees. My birth father, Terry Milligan, graduated from UC Berkeley in the 60s, joined the Peace Corps, and went off to Hilo, Hawaii, where he met my birth mother. My birth mother graduated from University of Washington with a political science degree, joined the Peace Corps, met Terry in Hilo, Hawaii, and had me. So I didn't know my birth parents growing up, but it turns out that both of them are extremely politically active. My birth mother, Mary Ann Murphy, lives in Spokane and is a very big activist in the state of Washington. It turns out that in 1988, she was a leader of a citizen statewide initiative. In 1988, I was graduated from Washington State University. I didn't even know who she was, but she was sponsoring an initiative to raise the sales tax to be able to fund children's programs. My birth mother was very progressive, very liberal, big Bernie supporter, but extremely politically active. When I hear about a lifetime ban, never being able to do ballot measures ever again, I think to myself, it is in my blood to do this kind of stuff. It has clearly been influenced in me since the day I was born that this is what I was meant to do. The point I'm trying to make here is a lifetime ban. My birth parents are both in their mid-70s, and they come from families that live a tremendous amount of time, all the way until their 90s. So I'm 53 now. We're talking about maybe 30, 40 years I've got left in me to be able to do political activism. I've done it for 22 years, and it is clearly something that I want to continue to be able to do. So this lifetime ban aspect of the case is hugely significant. The idea that I would never be able to do a ballot measure ever again is hugely impactful. We're going to talk a lot about what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, and I'll cover that in a second, but I think that it's important to just see the gravity of what is before the court. And when you ruled on February 22nd that you would allow this to proceed, that we would reach an actual hearing where we would decide for the first time, or at least hear for the first time, the issues of the merits of the state's case, that decision on your part was so significant and so impactful that it had an incredibly strong reaction by the state. The state, the idea that there would be any resolution of any aspect of this case early was hugely significant. I think it's really important to track what ended up happening here. So now we're scheduled for April 12th, which is about 4 weeks from now. It's very soon. It's coming up fast. And the state seems to want it both ways. When you want it sooner, they oppose it and say, move it to later. When I move it to later, now they want it sooner. In other words, it is a constant effort to never get you to actually be able to consider the issue itself, it seems to be a moving goalpost. And it's frustrating for a pro se litigant like myself to be put in this position. In the haste of trying to get in the thing done early, you waste an invaluable opportunity to be able to educate the court on the flaws, the deficiencies, and the errors that are in the state's case. I want you to hear the absolute best arguments I've got. The state will benefit from having that extra week because their lead counsel has withdrawn from the case. The lead counsel that has for decades represented the Attorney General's office and knows this stuff backwards and forwards, they're now disadvantaged by the fact that Linda Dalton is no longer the lead counsel in this case. They will benefit from the extra week, keeping it on the current day. As a pro se litigant, somebody with no legal experience whatsoever, it seems like the onus would be on the state to convince the court that the date that they chose is somehow an inappropriate date. There's been no evidence provided to the court that there is any kind of personal trip. There is nothing on the record whatsoever that this didn't happen right after you made a decision to have this hearing on April 12th. There's nothing in the record for us to not know that out of 600 attorneys in the Attorney General's office, that the only one that could argue this thing on April 12th is unavailable. It's simply within the realm of possibility that this lead attorney, this new lead attorney, was chosen for the exclusive purpose of the unavailability on that particular day. I think that disadvantaging me and putting me back a week or striking the motion altogether, which is just incredibly devastating, is based on the fact and the assertion, unsupported by any evidence, that there's a personal trip that's coming off that makes it where one of only 600 attorneys can make a simple argument that says, we think a lifetime ban is legal and constitutional and should be fine, and anybody else in that office. I think it is incredibly important for the court to recognize the fact that I'm fighting for something that's going to last. I mean, I'm 53, that's going to last for potentially 40 years. I want to get it right. I want to get it correct. I don't want the short term, which is helping get a particular ballot measure qualified, sacrificed in any way. But I don't want to give up this ballot measure. It's something that I think voters would vote for enthusiastically. And so I want to do everything I can for that short-term success, but also to have the long-term opportunity. I don't want to sacrifice one for the other. I don't want to have to sacrifice a ballot measure that voters would vote for if given the chance in exchange for saving me for the next 40 years of being able to do ballot measures. I don't think I should have to sacrifice First Amendment rights when I haven't been found guilty of anything yet. But the state's sole purpose of this entire process, where the process is the punishment, is to make sure that it is not an ancillary leftover consequence of the investigation and the litigation. It is the purpose of litigation is to chill and deter free speech from occurring that they disagree with. There are donors that I would normally be able to call and say, I'm doing a ballot measure that people really like and I think you're gonna like, but will you please donate to that? And I cannot get them to answer that phone call. And the reason they will not take that phone call is they are about to be deposed by the state of Washington in this case. That is not an ancillary consequence of the investigation. It is the purpose of the investigation, is to make sure that you have the investigation, the litigation, the discovery never end. I did not request an extra 3 months for discovery. The state asked for that. By asking for that extra 3 months, they bumped this trial from November of last year to January of next year. This is a moving of the goalposts that has happened from the beginning. They have managed to convince a whole lot of people that somehow I'm trying to delay things, that I'm the one who is refusing to cooperate, refusing to move this process along, when what I'm clearly doing is realizing that delay costs me money, delay costs my free speech rights opportunities, and it costs the state nothing. Let me correct that. It costs the state a lot of money for them to continue the litigation, but it's not their money. So they don't care that it costs more. The reality is they want it to keep going on and on and on. The fact that we have an April 12th date that's set, that's scheduled, that's ready to go, where you ruled, I want to at least hear it. You may not decide it. You may say, after hearing both sides, I'm not going to actually make this ruling. I'm going to go ahead and make this decision in January. But thank you all for the education you provided me on the issues that are before me. The issue is, this one is winning or losing. This one is, I can either do ballot measures or I can't do ballot measures. It is one or the other. And it's either going to happen on April 12th and allow that 91,000 to be released and allow me to be able to do ballot measures and not have a cloud over my head over whether or not I can do ballot measures or not. I want to have that time. I think an extra week is beneficial to me, but it is not detrimental to the state. It is helpful for the state to keep it on the same day. The only reason we're reconsidering this in the first place is they had to find some reason to object to your decision on having it on the 12th, and they decided to say, well, let's use Ivan's arguments against him. Let's say that, let's just move it up a week. What's wrong with that? The problem that we're having is they don't like it when it's later, they don't like it when it's earlier, they don't like it. They don't want you to ever get a chance to actually consider the merits of this. When I was in January, essentially having almost a nervous breakdown before you, it certainly felt that way as I talked for 83 minutes, is that I said, I really think that if I ever could get a chance to get to the merits of this case, that I would get a fair shake. But the state does not want to ever reach that point, and they're annoyed that I've managed to make it this far. I'm bankrupt. Because of the bankruptcy, I'm prevented and blocked by the state from getting legal counsel paid. They went through this whole thing with Joel Ard where he's in, they oppose it. He tries to withdraw, they oppose it. Everything that is done is meant to oppose, to obstruct, to delay, because that costs me more money. The issue of contempt. Mr. Iman is in contempt again. And so therefore, because he's in contempt again, you should strike the motion on April 12th. And I think that what is critically important for us to spend some time on, and you told me before that you weren't going to guarantee you were going to be indulging me, but I'm going to ask it of the court, is that we're going to talk about that contempt.
No, we're not, because it's immaterial to the issue for the court today, so the court is not taking into consideration any argument from the state or any argument or response from Mr. Iman with respect to whether Mr. Iman is in contempt or remains in contempt. That's immaterial to the court's decision this morning. So I don't need to hear that, Mr. Iman. No disrespect to you, and I don't need to hear it from the state either. No disrespect to Mr. Newman and or Mr. Seib.
Your Honor, you can't unring this bell. They rang the bell. They opened the door by saying that he's in contempt, and with all due respect, Your Honor, you can't unhear that.
Yes, I can. I just did. You'd be surprised what judges can do, because we're lawyers, we're trained lawyers. So when I made that ruling that it was stricken, it went out of my mind. So I've unheard it.
You've unheard it.
Rang the bell. I might hear it later. I mean, you know, there are many issues that are unresolved in this case, and if the issue of contempt comes up before me at some point in the future, then I'll hear it. But the fact or the non-fact that you are in contempt or not in contempt, or the arguments in support of or contrary to are not germane to me this morning.
At the risk of multiplying my contempt of court, I will.
I keep interrupting you, and I apologize.
No.
It's rude of me to do that. I want you to know that you are not being contemptuous, you're not being rude. I understand that you feel very strongly about these issues. I understand it, I appreciate it. You have never been disrespectful, let alone contemptuous. The point I'm trying to make is, it's a very discrete issue before the court today. Whether the court is going to grant the state's motion to strike or move forward your motion. I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I'm not going to strike your motion for partial summary judgment. I made that decision whenever we were last before the court. My consideration of this case, I have no preconceived ideas whatsoever, zero, about Mr. Iman's culpability or liability. I know what the issues are. I know what the allegations are. I know what the defenses are, in general terms, the latter. It makes the court feel, for lack of a better way to put it, uncomfortable making decisions with respect to what might be the consequences if Mr. Iman is found to be culpable or liable. But it just makes the court feel a little bit uncomfortable making rulings on what the remedies might be in the event Mr. Iman is found to be in violation of any of the statutes, because I want to go into the case, if the case gets to me for fact-finding, for trial, I want to go into it with a clean slate. Now I'm digressing. I apologize for that. So really, what I started to say is the court's thought process is, despite the court's inclination otherwise, I'll hear it. I'll hear your motion, and over the objection of the state, I'll hear it. My other thought process is, people have lives. Mr. Newman's going to be gone. Mr. Iman's argument that there are how many other hundreds of assistant attorney generals who can handle this case, that has some merit to it. That being said, it is Mr. Newman's case. Mr. Newman, let me rephrase that. Mr. Newman is the assistant attorney general who is handling this case. I'm not going to compel or make a decision that results in some other lawyer picking up the ball. So I'm going to hear the motion. But it's not going to be on the 12th, because I'm not going to tell Mr. Newman that he has to cancel his vacation. I wouldn't do that to Mr. Iman. I wouldn't do it to anybody, because we all have lives outside of the courtroom, and this court is not going to interfere with people's personal schedules. So I'm going to hear it, but I'm going to hear it either on the 5th or on the next day that Mr. Newman is available. And I'm going to put the ball in Mr. Iman's court. Would you rather hear it on the 5th? Would you rather have the court hear it on the 5th? Or Mr. Newman, what's your date? May 17th?
Please.
May 17th.
I said that I did not want to be contemptuous, and you said I'm not being contemptuous. You said you didn't want to feel uncomfortable. I'm about to try and make you feel uncomfortable.
Okay.
So, in a case like this, it is not under normal court rules. That under the normal court system that we have, you are innocent until proven guilty. And that's the way it works. 99.9% of the time, that's the way it works. But when it's a political litigation, you are guilty until you prove yourself innocent. It's a different standard. It may not be the standard in your mind, but I think that it is important for, I can only speak for myself. I cannot speak for you. I will speak from my own experience, is that in this litigation, when an argument is made that somebody is in contempt, the belief is that how can you reward someone who is in contempt with a partial summary judgment decision?
Say that again.
The argument would be
From who?
from the state, from anybody
Okay.
observing the situation. They would say, he's in contempt. How can you reward him with granting his motion for a partial summary judgment on the lifetime ban? How can you reward that because you're validating his contempt for the court, for the contempt for the state? You cannot unring that bell.
I'm gonna have to ask you to
Fair
wrap up,
enough.
Mr. Ryman. I have 14 other matters on the docket.
Fair enough, and you've been extremely patient with me. So the dates to remember. You've already said April 12th is out. So you put the ball in my court.
I did.
And you're a meanie for doing that, but I'm going to accept it. So that's the way it's going to be. Sooner, April 5th.
All right, April
April
5th.
5th.
is-
I think we're done.
Very good.
Thank
Thank you very much, Your Honor, for your indulgence. And I did look up just one thing. There's a book out called Born Fighting, and it's about Scott Irish. My birth father, Terry Milligan, Scott Irish, Marianne Murphy, my birth mother, Scott Irish. Looked it up, and these guys that came over on that are rabble-rousers. They're on the outs with society. They're against the aristocrats, and they cite all sorts of various people over history that have this in their blood, this fight for the working class, etc. And I literally had it forwarded to me this morning from this group that could potentially represent me. And Born Fighting, the Scott Irish fight for changing America. And I was just thinking to myself, I'd like to keep doing that. So anyway, thank you for your patience.
You're welcome.